Sign it, Funmi.
We need
Just
to discuss.
sign the papers and
How
stop
could you
making
let
this
it get
harder
this
than it needs to be.
You are leaving me after 7 years, and you cannot
How
even
can you
give
just
me a
stay-
real reason.
You want a real reason? Fine. Look
The
around
natural
you.
light
This flat. This life. I have outgrown it, and I have outgrown you. I am going somewhere, Funmi, somewhere big, and a man who is going somewhere cannot carry a poor woman on his back the whole way. You bring nothing to the table. No family,
I know
no
this is
money, no connections, nothing. I need a wife
I
who
honestly
adds to
expected
me,
better from
not
you.
one who holds me down. So sign, please. Let us both stop pretending you were ever going to be enough.
And Funmilayo Adeleke picked up the pen and signed her name on the papers that ended her marriage, and said only one quiet thing to the man walking out of her life.
You are right, Segun. I bring nothing to the table.
It's
I
important
hope
to
one
remember.
day you find out exactly how much nothing that was.
My people, that man signed those papers believing he was throwing away a poor schoolteacher who would drag down his shining future. He had no idea, none at all, that he had just divorced one of the richest women on the entire African continent, 72 hours before the whole world would find it out. Come closer, sit down, because before we talk about the $12 billion, we must first talk about what was built and about who was really standing in that little flat. Funmilayo
Today we will
Adeleke was
review
a
the
school teacher
fundamental
in
properties
Lagos.
of these shapes.
She taught primary 4 at a modest school in Yaba. She rode Danfo to work like everybody else. She counted her salary carefully and made it stretch, and she lived with her husband Segun in a 2-bedroom flat in Ojota that was clean and small and entirely ordinary. To everyone who knew her,
Segun,
to Segun,
I know
to
it's
the
hard.
neighbors, to the other teachers, Funmi was a poor woman. Sweet, yes. Hard-working, yes. But poor. A woman with no rich relatives, no big name behind her, nothing to offer a man but herself. And that, my people, was exactly the way Funmi wanted it, because Funmi had a secret, and the secret was not a small one. Funmilayo Adeleke was the only child of Chief Olawale Adeleke. And if that name means nothing to you, let me tell you what it meant in Lagos. Chief Olawale Adeleke was the founder of the Adeleke Group, cement, telecommunications, oil servicing, real estate spread across 3 countries, one of the largest privately held fortunes on the continent, an empire that the business magazines valued when they dared to guess at something north of $12 billion. Funmi had not grown up poor. Funmi had grown up in a mansion in Ikoyi, with a gate that cost more than the school she now taught in, with drivers and house staff, and holidays in places most Nigerians only see in films. So how, my people, does the only heiress of a $12 billion empire end up teaching primary 4 in Yaba and riding Danfo to work? That is the real beginning of this story, and it is not the beginning you expect. She walked away. She chose it. When Funmi was 23, her father, a great man in business and a hard man in his house, decided, as such fathers do, that he would arrange her life for her. He had chosen the son of a business ally for her to marry, a merger dressed up as a wedding, and he had informed her, not asked her, that this was how it would be, because an Adeleke daughter did not marry for something as foolish as love. An Adeleke daughter married for the good of the empire. And Funmi, who had her father's iron in her spine even as she refused his iron hand,
Said no.
she said no to the man, no to the merger, and no to a life lived as a chess piece in another person's game. And her father, unused to that word from anyone, and least of all from his own daughter, told her that if she would not live as an Adeleke, she could go and see how she liked living as a nobody. So she went. She took nothing, not 1 naira of his money, not 1 string of his connections. She walked out of the mansion in Ikoyi with a single suitcase and a teaching certificate she had earned quietly, against his wishes, precisely because she had always suspected she might one day need a way to feed herself that did not depend on him. And she built, from nothing, with her own 2 hands, the ordinary, honest, poor life of Funmi, the schoolteacher. If you have ever walked away from something everyone else would have killed to keep, money, comfort, a golden cage, because it cost you your own soul to stay, type "I chose myself" in the comments, because that is the rarest kind of courage there is, and Funmi had it at 23, and it is the whole reason this story ends the way it does. Now understand, my people, why she kept the secret even from the man she married. Because Funmi had learned in that mansion the one lesson the very rich learn early and never forget, that when people know you have money, you can never again be sure why they love you. Is it you they want, or the gate, the drivers, the name? Every smile becomes a question. Every "I love you" carries a shadow. And Funmi, more than anything in this world, wanted one thing her father's billions had never been able to buy her. She wanted to be loved for herself, just herself, the woman, not the fortune. So when she met Segun Ogunlesi, a mid-level accountant with big dreams, and he fell for Funmi, the poor schoolteacher, she did not tell him. Not because she was deceiving him, understand that clearly, but because she was testing the world the only way a hidden heiress can. She wanted to know that a man could love her when she had nothing. She wanted to be chosen for who she was. And for a while, my people, she believed she had been. The first years were good. They were poor together, and it was sweet. Segun was ambitious, but ambition in a young man is not yet a sin. It is only a sin once it learns to step on people. They ate cheap and laughed a lot, and dreamed out loud in that little flat, and Funmi would look at her husband across a plate of rice and think,
This is it. This is the thing my father's money could never buy. A man who loves me for me.
She had won the only bet she had ever truly wanted to win, or so she thought. Let me give you one of those early years, so you feel what he threw away and do not just hear it. There was a season before the good job when money was so tight that Funmi and Segun shared a single plate of rice some evenings and called it a picnic, and laughed, and meant the laugh. She used to wake before him to press his one good shirt with a coal iron so he would look sharp for his interviews, and he used to walk her to the bus stop each morning because he said those 10 minutes were the best part of his day. She kept, all through the marriage, a photograph from that time, the two of them outside the little flat, thin and broke and grinning like people who had already won everything worth winning. That, my people, was the man she married. That was the marriage she chose over a mansion, and the most heartbreaking thing about the man who later signed those divorce papers was not that he was cruel. It was that he had once, genuinely, been that grinning man outside the flat and had let ambition quietly eat him from the inside, year by year, until there was nothing left of him but the appetite. Because something happens to certain men, my people, when the world starts offering them a bigger table. Segun got a good job, a real one, at a big firm on the island, and he began to climb, and as he climbed, he began to look around at the other men climbing beside him and at the wives on their arms, wives with rich fathers, wives who opened doors, wives whose family names were introductions in themselves, and Segun began to look at his own wife, his sweet poor Danfo-riding schoolteacher, and to feel something curdle in him that he would never have believed, in those first sweet years, he was capable of feeling. Shame. He began to be embarrassed by her. At company functions, he would introduce her quickly and steer the conversation elsewhere, because "she's a teacher" landed with a small thud among people whose wives were the daughters of senators and oil chiefs. He stopped bringing her to things. He started in the privacy of the flat to make comments, small at first, then not small, about how she dressed, how she spoke, how she didn't understand his world, how she was holding him back. And Funmi, who had walked away from $12 billion rather than be made small, watched the man she had married for love begin, day by day, to make her small for being poor, the very poverty she had chosen so that a man like him could love her truly. The cruelest irony, my people, and we are not even at the twist yet, he was ashamed of the one thing about her that was a lie. He looked at his poor wife and felt shame, and the poverty he was ashamed of was a costume she had put on precisely so she could find a man who would not care about wealth. He failed the test she had spent her whole marriage quietly hoping he would pass, and he never even knew there was a test. But here is where it stops being a simple story, my people, because I do not tell simple stories, and Segun's shame was not, in the end, the real reason he left. The real reason was worse, and I want you to hear it, because it is the hinge of everything that comes after. If you have ever been left with a cruel excuse and only found out later that the excuse was hiding a far uglier truth, type "the excuse was a lie" in the comments, because Funmi was about to learn that "you're too poor for me" was not the reason Segun was leaving. It was only the reason he was willing to say out loud. The real reason had a name, and the name was Bisola Danjuma. Chief Danjuma was the chairman of the firm where Segun worked, an old, powerful, connected man, and the kind of chairman whose favor could lift a mid-level accountant into the boardroom in a single season. And Chief Danjuma had a daughter, Bisola, unmarried, polished, moving in exactly the world Segun had begun to ache for. Somewhere in his climbing, Segun had done the arithmetic that ambitious, hollow men do, that a marriage into the Danjuma family would be worth more to his career than any promotion he could ever earn on merit. That Bisola was not a woman to him but a ladder, and he had begun quietly to climb her. So when Segun stood in that little flat and told Funmi she was too poor, that she brought nothing to the table, that a man going somewhere could not carry her, he was not describing a marriage that had failed. He was clearing a space. He was removing the poor wife to make room for the rich one. "You bring nothing to the table" was not heartbreak, my people. It was a business decision. He was trading up, and he was so certain of the arithmetic, poor teacher on one side, chairman's daughter on the other, that he never once, in 7 years, bothered to ask himself the one question that would have changed his entire life. Who is this woman, really? Where does she actually come from? He had decided on the day he met her that she was nobody, and a man who has decided you are nobody never checks his sums. He should have checked his sums, because 72 hours after Funmilayo Adeleke signed those divorce papers, 3 days, my people, 3, Chief Olawale Adeleke died in his sleep in the mansion in Ikoyi, and the reading of his will turned the world upside down. Now let me tell you something about that old man, because it matters, and because it is the part of this story that is not about money at all. In the years since his daughter had walked out of his house with a single suitcase and refused every naira of his fortune, Chief Olawale Adeleke had changed. Not quickly, hard men do not change quickly, but truly. He had watched, from a distance, through people he quietly paid to watch, as the daughter he had cast out built an honest, ordinary life with her own 2 hands, teaching other people's children, riding danfo, refusing to trade on his name even when trading on it would have made her life 100 times easier. And slowly, over years, the thing that had begun in him as fury, how dare she, had turned into something he had never expected to feel toward anyone, respect. And then, near the end, something even harder for such a man, shame at himself. He came to understand, too late to say it to her face, that of all the people circling his fortune, the nephews, the board members, the hangers-on, all of them measuring his empire with hungry eyes, the only person he had ever met who genuinely did not want his money was the one person he had thrown away for refusing it. And so, my people, Chief Olawale Adeleke did the only thing a proud man who has realized his mistake too late can do. He wrote it into his will. He left the entire Adeleke group, cement, telecoms, oil servicing, real estate, the whole $12 billion empire, to his estranged daughter Funmilayo, not to the board, not to the nephews, to her. And in the will he left a line that his lawyer read aloud to a silent room, a line that Funmi would carry for the rest of her life.
"I leave everything to my daughter Funmilayo, not because she wants it. She is the only person I have ever known who does not, but because that is precisely why she is the only one I can trust to hold it. A fortune should belong to the one person who proved they could live without it. Forgive an old man, Funmi. You were right, and I was wrong, about the only thing that ever mattered."
My people, sit with that for a moment before we return to Segun, because it is easy to rush past it toward the delicious part, and the delicious part is not the important part. An old man spent a fortune's worth of years learning the single lesson his fortune had hidden from him, that the only love and the only loyalty worth anything at all is the kind that would still be there if the money vanished tomorrow. His daughter had known that at 23. It took him a lifetime and a deathbed, but he learned it, and in learning it he handed the person who had never wanted power the one thing that made her fit to hold it. There is a deep and quiet justice in that, my people, that has nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with truth, wealth landing at last in the one pair of hands that would not be poisoned by it. And here is a thing I want you to hold, because it is the quiet heart of this whole story, and it is easy to lose in the noise of $12 billion. The money is not the point. It was never the point. The money is only the light that got switched on. Everything it revealed, Segun's true face, the old man's late wisdom, the real gold of the people who loved Funmi when she was poor, Funmi's own unbought heart, all of it was already there in the dark, exactly as it was, before a single naira ever moved. The fortune did not make any of these people who they are, it only made them visible. That, my people, is what sudden wealth truly does. It does not change a soul, it exposes one. It is a lamp carried into a dark room, and every person it falls upon is revealed as precisely, exactly what they already were. Funmilayo Adeleke, the poor schoolteacher who 3 days earlier had been told she brought nothing to the table, was now, by the stroke of a dead man's pen, one of the wealthiest people on the African continent. And within a week, my people, all of Lagos, knew. You cannot keep a thing like that quiet. The Adeleke succession was front-page news, boardroom news, society news. The business world convulsed with the story of the reclusive heiress who had walked away and been called home by her father's will. And it did not take the gossip of Lagos long, it never does, to attach to that grand story a small, delicious, devastating footnote. That the new mistress of the $12 billion Adeleke group had, just days before inheriting it, been divorced by her husband, a mid-level accountant named Segun Ogunlesi, who had thrown her out for being poor. Now, here comes the first turn, my people, and it did not fall on Funmi, it fell on the very ladder Segun had been climbing, because Chief Danjuma, the chairman, the powerful old man whose daughter Segun had been so carefully courting as his path to the top, Chief Danjuma read that footnote too. And Chief Danjuma was not a sentimental man, he was a strategic one, which is exactly why what happened next was so complete. He looked at Segun Ogunlesi, and he no longer saw a promising young executive worth marrying into the family. He saw a man who had just become a national joke, the fool who divorced the Adeleke heiress for being poor. A man whose judgment was now, permanently, in front of the whole of Lagos, a punchline, and a strategic man does not marry his daughter to a punchline. He does not promote a punchline into his boardroom. Overnight, my people, the doors Segun had been so patiently prying open swung shut, all of them at once. Bisola Danjuma, who had never loved him either, for she had been doing her own quieter arithmetic, dropped him without a second phone call the moment her father made clear which way the wind now blew. The promotion evaporated. The invitations stopped. The ladder Segun had thrown his marriage away to climb was pulled out from under him so fast he did not even feel the rungs go. He had traded a diamond for a handful of glass, my people, and then watched the glass turn to sand and run out through his fingers in the very same season. He ended, in a matter of weeks, with none of it. Not the rich wife he left for, not the promotion he schemed for, and not the poor wife he threw away, who, it turned out, had never been poor at all, and was now further beyond his reach than any woman in Nigeria. And of course, my people, because they always do, Segun came crawling back. First he came the soft way. Suddenly the man who could not carry a poor woman on his back was full of tender memory. He sent messages. He spoke of the good years, the little flat, the plates of rice, the dreams they had dreamed together. He said the divorce had been a terrible mistake, that he had been confused, not himself, under pressure at work. He stood outside the gates of the Adeleke estate in Ikoyi, the very kind of gate he had never imagined his poor wife came from, and asked to see her and spoke to anyone who would listen of love. My people, I want you to notice the exact moment his love was rediscovered. It was not the day he left. It was not any day in 7 years of marriage. It was the day the number 12 billion appeared beside his ex-wife's name. That is not a man who realized he loved her. That is a man who realized he had made an accounting error. His heart had not changed. His arithmetic had. When the soft way failed, and it failed because Funmi did not so much as come to the gate, he tried the hard way. He found himself a lawyer, and the lawyer went looking for a claim. Surely, they reasoned, a man married to a woman for 7 years is owed a share of what she now holds. Surely $12 billion cannot simply walk past a husband. And here, my people, is where Segun's own cruelty, his own haste, closed the last door on him with a sound like a vault ceiling, and he had shut it himself, with his own 2 hands, 3 days too early. Because the law is not sentimental either. An inheritance, my people, is what is called separate property. It belongs to the one who inherits it, and to no one else, not to a spouse, not to a partner, unless it is shared into the marriage. And Funmi had inherited nothing while she was married to Segun. She had inherited it 3 days after the divorce was signed. 3 days after Segun himself had stood in that flat and demanded she sign quickly to be rid of her. He had been in such a hurry to trade her away that he had legally cut himself off from the very fortune he now wanted by 72 hours. Had he been a patient man, a faithful man, a man who simply had not left, he would have been the husband of an heiress. Instead, he had chosen, freely and cruelly, to stop being her husband exactly 3 days before it would have meant everything. His lawyers looked at the dates, and the dates told a story no argument could bend, and they told him gently, what I will tell you plainly. He had no claim. None. He had signed it away himself, in his rush to be rid of a woman he was certain was worthless. His greed had been 3 days faster than his fortune. And there is a terrible perfect justice in that, my people, that the very haste with which a man discards you can be the thing that saves everything you have from him. There was one meeting, only one. Funmi agreed to see him a single time, not because she owed him a moment, but because she is a bigger person than the story deserved, and because she had one thing to say, and wanted to say it to his face and then be free of him forever. He came ready to plead. And before he could begin, she spoke, calm, quiet, the way you have heard her be calm and quiet since the first line of this story.
You said I brought nothing to the table, Segun. Do you remember? You looked around our home and you decided you knew exactly what I was worth, down to the last naira. And you were so sure of it that you never once asked me a single real question about who I am. In 7 years.
She let that sit.
I did not hide my family from you to trick you. I hid it because I wanted, just once in my life, to be loved by a man who did not know about the money. That was the only thing I ever wanted from you, to be chosen for myself. And you failed, Segun, not because you left a rich woman. You did not know she was rich. You failed because of the man you became the moment you believed I could do nothing for you. That is when a person's true face shows, my people. Not when you are useful to them, but when they are certain you are useless. And I saw your true face, clearly, completely. 3 days before my father's will could have chained me to it for the rest of my life.
She stood.
So I am not here for revenge, Segun. I do not need it, and you are not worth the strength it would cost me. I am here to thank you, truly. You think you divorced me and lost a fortune, but you gave me the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. You showed me exactly who you were while I still had a whole life left to live without you. Most women learn that lesson far too late, after the children, after the decades, after there is no life left to save. You taught me at 30, and in 3 days, and it cost me only a marriage that was already a lie. That is not a loss, Segun. That is a rescue. And I will spend some small, grateful part of my new fortune one day on remembering that the cheapest, cruelest thing a man ever said to me, "You bring nothing to the table," turned out to be the most valuable sentence I ever heard. Goodbye. Do not come to the gate again.
And she left him standing there, my people, with his mouth open and his arithmetic in ruins. And she did not look back, because a woman who once walked away from $12 billion with a single suitcase has never, not once in her life, needed anything from a man like Segun Ogunlesi. He simply never bothered to find that out. Let me tell you how it settled, my people, because this is not a story that ends in a courtroom, and it is not a story that ends in a shouting match. It ends, as the truest ones do, in a quiet, well-earned peace. Segun did not go to prison. He had committed no crime but the oldest one, the crime of contempt for the person he thought could not touch him, and that crime carries no sentence except the one it hands down to itself. But understand what his life became. He is to this day in every boardroom and at every party in Lagos where the story is known, and it is known everywhere, the man who divorced the Adeleke heiress for being poor. It is the first thing said of him, and the last thing remembered. He reaches for a business deal, and the other man smiles and thinks it. He is introduced to a woman, and someone leans over and whispers it. He built his whole life on the worship of wealth and status, my people, and he will live the rest of it as the single most famous cautionary tale about wealth and status that his city has ever produced. Some punishments need no judge. He carries his in the face of every person who has ever heard his name. And Funmi did not forget the people who had loved her when she was poor, which is to say, the people who had loved her truly, since poor was the only version of her they were given to love. There was a woman near her old school in Yaba, a food seller everyone called Iya, who ran a small buka, and who, in the leanest months of Funmi's marriage, the month Segun did not know about, when money was genuinely short, had fed a struggling young teacher on credit, again and again, and had waved away the debt with a laugh and the words,
"Eat, my daughter. You will pay me when God has blessed you."
Iya Rukayat had fed the future mistress of a $12 billion empire out of the kindness of a woman who had almost nothing, expecting nothing, because it was simply who she was. Funmi did not forget her. She never could. Today Iya Rukayat does not run one small buka on a Yaba street corner. She oversees a chain of them across Lagos, built and funded by Funmi, her name over every door, her children in the best schools in the country. Because a woman who feeds a stranger on credit and calls her
"My daughter"
is not a food seller, my people. She is the richest kind of person there is, and she had simply been waiting all along for God to finally get around to blessing her the way she had blessed everyone else. There was one more too, a fellow teacher named Toyin, the only colleague who had never once made Funmi feel small in the staff room, who had quietly covered her classes in the hardest weeks without being asked, and who, on the very day the divorce papers came, long before a single soul had heard the word,
"Inheritance,"
had said,
"Funmi, that man is a fool, and you are worth 10 of him, and I will say it to his face if you like."
She had said it when Funmi was, as far as she knew, only a heartbroken poor woman with nothing to give back, which is to say, she said it for free, when it could buy her nothing at all. Funmi remembered that too. When the schools were built, it was Toyin she asked to lead them. Not a consultant, not an executive with a fine degree, but the one teacher who had defended a poor woman in a staff room when there was no fortune anywhere in sight to reward her for it. Loyalty given in the dark, my people, is the only loyalty worth anything in the light. Funmi had learned to tell the difference the hard way, and once you learn it that way, you never ever forget it again. And what did Funmi do with the empire itself, the $12 billion, the cement and the towers and the whole vast machine her father built and her ex-husband could not imagine she came from? She did the thing that made her father, wherever he is, know at last that he had chosen right. She ran it well and honestly, and without letting it turn her into the kind of person who measures a human being by what they bring to the table, and out of it, this is the part I love, my people, out of that great fortune, she built schools. Good schools, free schools, for the children of Danfo drivers, and market women and struggling teachers in Yaba and Ojota and 100 places like them, staffed by teachers paid properly at last. Because Funmilayo Adeleke had been, before she was an heiress, a primary 4 teacher who rode the bus, and she had never once been ashamed of it, and she was not about to start now that she could have bought the whole city. The poor schoolteacher did not disappear when the billions arrived. She simply finally had the means to do for 100,000 children what Iya Rukayat had once done for her, to feed them on credit and wave away the debt and say,
"Eat, my child. You will pay me forward when God has blessed you."
If this story reached somewhere real in you tonight, if you have ever been discarded by someone the moment they decided you were of no use to them, or been loved suddenly and warmly only after your fortunes changed, then do not leave this family without joining it first. Subscribe now so the next story finds you the very night it lands. And tell me, in the comments, what city, what country is this story reaching you in tonight? From Lagos to London, from Accra to Atlanta, from Nairobi to New York, from Ikoyi to Houston, I want to see just how far this one has traveled. And do not go yet, because there is already another story waiting for you right there on your screen, right now. Another person the proud and the greedy decided was worth nothing. Another table they were so sure had nothing on it. Because here is the truth I want you to carry home with you tonight, longer than any name in this story. A person will always show you exactly who they are on the day they become convinced you can do nothing for them. So when they show you, believe them the very first time, because that face is the true one. And be very careful, my people, oh, be very careful how you treat the one you have decided is beneath you, the one you are sure brings nothing to the table. Because you have not seen the table, you have only seen the wrapper, and the wrapper, so often, is the cheapest thing about what is inside it. A man threw away a diamond because it came folded in plain paper, and then spent the rest of his life explaining to everyone who asked why his hands were empty. Until next time, my people, never measure a soul by what it can do for you. And never, ever be so sure you know what someone is worth, because the day you decide a person is nothing is the very day you tell the whole world exactly what you are.